I do, though, want to go back to our brilliant speakers at the beginning. I hope you acknowledge that you've really provoked this conversation and made it very live for us today. So a really big thank you to you. But also then to turn to you for any last minute reflections, or perhaps just, you know, what's your one key takeaway from this conversation today? I might start, if that's okay with you, Ruairi, and then ask Nana, just in a few minutes. Thanks.
Very briefly, a great man died today, Seamus Dean. I don't know if any of you know, poet and critic, a really interesting critic of the colonial and post-colonial mindset in Ireland. And he had a phrase which I think is really interesting about the action that takes place between the alternatives. And I think what's really interesting about the conversation we have today is there's lots of opinions, there's lots of alternatives, but how we come together on the actions to take forward the energy that's there. And the really important point of the questions, and I think there was one question that I asked that did seem to provoke more of a reaction than others, is how do we individually and collectively deliver on our mandates? And how do we maximize our impact? And how do we keep going back and re-interrogating ourselves, you know, so that we can do that as best as possible? And I think, you know, discussions like that today, really, really important about that as we try to collectively and individually, you know, make the difference that, you know, Nana, I think, challenged us to make when she spoke earlier on. So back to you, Suzanne. Thank you very much for a really interesting and great conference.
Great. Thanks, Ruairi. And over to you, Nana.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And again, thank you for inviting me into your space. I just dropped out of, because of an a power cut, I dropped out of my last my last group accidentally, but there was some very good points that came out of there that I thought, for me, is something that I'm taking away from here, and I believe the group should also take. And that was really how to continue ensure that the conversation continues from here. So what kind of actions that need to be taken? And one that Olive mentioned, Olive, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your surname properly, so I won't even attempt it. But it was about the fact that the conversation needed to be national and to move from just the NGO, INGO space to a national level. And she actually gave an example of how the president of Ireland had now, you know, taken the conversation on ethics and made it something that was a national conversation, and that this had to take a similar kind of, form. And I like what she said. I wrote it down, that it's about ethics, values, and being authentic domestically and internationally. And I thought that those were, and that links to what, pardon me, your name, I won't attempt it, but I think when I say it, you know who I'm talking about. When you talked about the Irish sense of pride. And I think that this is something that you could really connect to. But another point that I'd like to just mention before I say goodbye to all of you is the fact that the space may seem crowded, but it's big. The sky is big enough for all of us. I really think that it is the form that we take to enable us fit carefully into the spaces that we fit into. And so that may be what for each organization, and Dóchas as a group would have to look at. What is our form now? And how does it fit into the global space to enable that kind of connectivity, that kind of transformation that we need for true sustainable development? Not just some SDG lists of goals, but something that is truly authentic and is sustainable. So I would like to leave the floor with these words. And thanks again. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nana. And as you were speaking, just left me with three big things here. As you say, that the sky is big enough for all of us. But like with your electricity, there will be bumps along the way. But also maybe to say we're all struggling with our different names, whether they're Irish or European or West African. But hey, we all just want to carry on the conversation. So let's forget surnames and all our complicated languages. We have that common interest, don't we? So that's a really, really good way to end, and really appreciate that from our speakers.